be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. I'm sure that most of us here this morning grew up with an almost identical understanding of what church was. Church was the place where everybody in the neighborhood went on a Sunday morning. Church was also the place where almost everyone there looked like us. Same dress, same appearance, same race, same basic social status. We almost all worshiped every Sunday with people pretty much just like us. Those inside the church expected those outside who looked like us to walk in and ask to become members. And from membership to pledge card to committee assignments, it was just a matter of weeks. And that membership usually was for life. This is really the model, that sort of Norman Rockwell model, if you will, of church as so many of us know it, and as many of us miss it badly. It's the picture of church that I know many of you hope and pray will return complete, with well-dressed couples, each probably with 3 or 4 polite, well-dressed children. That hope remains alive, but that church is just about gone. Swallowed up sometime in the 70s and 80s and on through the 90s. Oh, it lingers here and there, but it is essentially gone. Churches now who choose to sit and wait for the right kind of people to walk in and ask if they may please join the church, those churches shrink and they die. And even efforts that churches make to add new music and write the words on the wall, those efforts, they can do something, but they will not bring that lovely old church back. We simply can no longer be content to wait inside our beautiful buildings for people to come and knock on our doors and asking us to please let them join our church. And if this is a problem, and I believe it is a problem, then actually the parable of the Good Samaritan is a wonderful metaphor for both the problem and the solution. And as we look at this so familiar parable, let's just remind ourselves this. That parable turned all reasonable expectations right on their head. That's what Jesus does. So let's look at the parable. A lawyer testing Jesus asks what he must do to have eternal life. Jesus answers with a question, which he often does. Well, what is written in the law? And the lawyer, being quite bright, replies correctly, love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus commends the lawyer's answer. But the lawyer, still testing, still pushing, asks Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? This is a great mistake. This is the lawyer's one question too many, the one he didn't really know the answer he was going to get. But it's also our opportunity to learn. Jesus responds, again, not with an answer, but with a parable. Robbers encountered a man, beat him, stripped him, and leave him half dead, naked in a ditch on the side of the road that connects Jerusalem and Jericho. The man in the ditch is a nobody. No identification, no name, no allegiance, no clothes, just a body in a ditch. A priest going down from Jerusalem to Jericho sees the man in the ditch, crosses to the other side and continues on his way. And then a Levite, another priest, comes along and he sees the beaten man and he crosses to the other side of the road and he continues on his way. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, his heart went out to the man. The Samaritan then proceeds to cross the road to the man, bandage his wounds, lift him up, put the man on the Samaritan's donkey, and take him to an inn. And there he cared for him more. And there he paid for staying in the inn. And as the Samaritan left, he told the innkeeper, if the man needs any more care or if he has to stay longer, then I, the Samaritan, will pay the bill. The two priests should have stopped and helped the man. There really is no excuse given because there are no excuses available. The command to love your neighbor has no limits. It offers no excuses. It offers no wiggle room. How do I get out of this now? The two priests failed to do what they should have done. Why did they fail? You know, people for a long time have tried to create all kinds of reasons. I mean, Tom mentioned one, the blood on the body. But of course, in part that was touching a corpse, and this man is only half dead. But it's hard not to agree with Martin Luther King's analysis. I put that speech in the bulletin. You can look at it at some point. King spoke in Memphis, 1968. He said the two priests were afraid. They were afraid of what they saw, a gruesome sight. They were afraid of stopping, and they were afraid of being attacked. Afraid perhaps that this body was nothing but a ploy, some sort of a ruse to get him, the priest, to walk over so they too could be attacked, robbed, and beaten. As King said, the first question each of the priests asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? And I think we all know that kind of fear. I think we know that. There's a cost to this selfish fear. The man in the ditch obviously suffers a little longer, but the priests suffer as well. Selfish fear and the refusal to love that it breeds hardens the heart, shrivels the soul, and shuts down, reduces the impulse to reach out, to offer care beyond ourselves. Fear forces us in on ourselves and shrinks our world. The Samaritan. Without any thought, we all refer to the Samaritan in this parable as the Good Samaritan. It's not in the parable. This is our label. This is our label. No one in the crowd that day would have listened or would have even thought about calling the Samaritan the Good Samaritan. That would be comparable to us talking about the good jihadist or the loving and compassionate ISIS warrior. It's on the same level. The Samaritan was the enemy, the despised, the hated one, unclean for a million reasons. But Jesus stands everything on its head when he asks this simple question to the lawyer. Which of the three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? Just as the lawyer knew immediately the answer, I think we also know who was neighbor to the man in the ditch. It was the Samaritan. And so we have three men living under the same command to love their neighbor. Two cross the road to get away from the man. One crosses to reach out, to bandage, to care, pick him up, take him to an inn, pay for him, and provide for further care. The cost to the Samaritan can be measured in terms of money spent and time wasted, I suppose. But the cost to the Samaritan, had he also looked, seen, and then continued, would have been the same incalculable loss, shrinkage, hardening, and losing the ability to love. The Samaritan gave of his time, money, and self to see, stop, cross over, attend to, provide for, and care is love of neighbor. What the Samaritan did is what being a neighbor and loving your neighbor actually look like. That is what he did. You know, the parable's answer is not what the lawyer wanted. The lawyer probably wanted to know where he, the lawyer, could draw the line between neighbor and non-neighbor. He wanted to know who was not his neighbor, which people he did not have to love. And so Jesus' answer to him is really appalling. There are no such people. It's not the answer the lawyer wanted, and I expect if we were to ask the same thing, it would not be the answer that we want. And this all-encompassing answer of who we are to love, it's not just in the parable, it's the New Testament response to that question. Listen to this from the Apostle of James. What good is it, my friends, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. And if one of you goes up and you say to him, "Go, I wish you well. I hope you can keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? Faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Listen to these words from the Epistle of John. This is how we've come to understand and experience love. Christ sacrificed his life for us. This is why we ought to live sacrificially and not just be out for ourselves. If you see some brother or sister in need and have the means to do something about it but turn a cold shoulder and do nothing, what happens to God's love? It disappears, and you made it disappear. The parable ends this way. Jesus says, "Go and do likewise." All of the reasons and all the excuses and even understandable fear really just melt away when faced with these words. Go and do likewise. And I would suggest that all these centuries later, we are still being measured against the standard set by the Samaritan. I'm pretty confident that I know where the new members we so desperately want are to be found. They're over there on the other side of the road. We've seen them. We see them every day. And now it's up to us to decide. Do we continue in our ways and just pass on by? Or do we dare to cross over to the other side of the road and perhaps encounter something brand new in our world? And as we consider that decision, let's just remember this: go and do likewise.